Alright, what is up guys, it is Storm back here with another video, and in this one I am bringing you part 21 to the New Dawn, a Naruto / Boruto story. Now if you want to check this story out for yourself, the link to it will be down in the description below. But before the video begins, if you like the content you're seeing, be sure to subscribe, like, and comment. I mean, they're all free, so why not? If you want some dope channel merch, the link to that will be down in the description below. And if you want to see more of me, go check out my other channels and go follow me on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok, which will all be linked down below. But without further ado, why don't we just dive right on in. Boruto rocked back and forth in his seat in a manner that would have most doctors questioning his sanity. His hands were clasped in front of his chest as he prayed and watched the large screen above the ring, choosing two competitors. It was the third day and he had yet to be chosen, and it was driving him insane. Sarada had fought twice, including her defeat of Shinki. Her second opponent had been a pushover, a tuning from Cloud that, in Boruto's opinion, would have struggled with an academy student. Himawari had fought once, obliterating her opponent, a swordsman from the mist, with an elegant flourish of the gentle fist. Inojin was defeated on his first match, losing to a powerful rock ninja whose mastery of the lava release made even Boruto wary. Of course, Mitsuki hadn't fought either, but he sat next to Boruto unperturbed, and continued to watch the matches with feigned disinterest, aloof as ever. Boruto swore as the first columns topped, revealing a pretty young woman from the rain. She was of no great renown, but Boruto still prayed he was her opponent. He was dying to show off. If he didn't fight today, he was certain he would go insane. He whined as the second column came to a halt, showing the face of a grizzled man from the sand. With a sigh of defeat, he slumped back into his chair. He didn't even pay attention as the arena shifted into a half-desert, half-mountainous battlefield. "Don't worry, brother," Himawari said reassuringly. "You'll get your chance soon." Boruto grumbled under his breath. That was easy for her to say. She was the apple of their dad's and grandfather's eye. She didn't have anything to prove. Next to him, Sarada giggled at his misfortune. Sarada really didn't have anything to worry about. Her first match was against the famed Shinki of the Sand, nephew of the Kazekage, in the opening round of the tournament. Her victory was in newspapers across the continent. She had her own television interviews. Boruto would have killed for less. Her ambition of becoming the 8th Hokage seemed to be within her reach, especially if she kept up her impressive showing. Boruto's eyes were drawn to the ring as the rain ninja conjured rain clouds. Now that was an interesting jutsu, just another thing to gnaw at him. No Byakugan, no chance at reverse engineering all these techniques, but he did have the next best thing. "How is she doing that?" Boruto asked. Leaning over to whisper in Sarada's ear, he saw her eyes bleed red out of the corner of his vision. It's a jutsu that manipulates the water vapor in the air, forcing it to coalesce where the user focuses their chakra, Sarada said, her eyes roving over the rain ninja as she pushed her glasses up her nose. Boruto could work with that. He tried later after the tournament ended. He watched the rain ninja brandish her umbrella. She sent tiny raindrops flying in every direction. Boruto was surprised when they cut through solid stone. The sand ninja was even more surprised as a few drops sank deep into his legs, sending him sprawling to the ground in pain. Mifune called the match and the ring shifted back into its default state. Boruto sighed and began to go through possible hand seals. It was a water-based technique, using maybe wind? So, bird, rat, ox, snake maybe? He'd try that one first. The seats around him went silent, prompting Boruto to look up. Sarada was elbowing him in the ribs as Himawari squealed excitedly. Boruto felt his heart flutter as he looked at the ring, and saw his face and name on the screen. A grin spread across his face. "Showtime. Good luck, brother," Himawari gushed, as Boruto stood and leapt into the ring. He was practically bouncing on the walls of his feet with excitement, as their entire culture had their eyes on him, and him alone. Boruto was in his element, the center of attention, yet one thing stood out to him. The crowd was usually roaring and cheering in excitement, which they were, yet there seemed to be almost a muted effect. There were some boos and jeers and whispers to neighboring spectators. Boruto could hear the one word the entire stadium said: cheater. It made his blood boil. He looked at the screen as the second column slowed, and chose his opponent. "Versus Yurui of the Cloud," Mifune declared. There was a god, Boruto decided, and he had a cruel sense of humor. He would prove them wrong. All of them. He was a prodigy. He was powerful. He wasn't a cheater. He wasn't weak. Yurui leapt into the ring. He was taller now, Boruto noticed. Not quite as tall as him, but he was much more muscular. Like most men from Cloud, his skin had developed a tan, a result of living so high in the mountains. His hair was still the same lame style, slicked back and held in place by his headband. The childish necklace with the visage of the 8 tails hung from his neck. He had 4 swords, 2 on his back, 2 on his hip, and he was smirking knowingly at him. Boruto frowned. Both ninjas strode to the center of the ring. "Begin!" Mifune's voice rang out. Boruto's frown deepened as Yorui's smirk widened. Was he not taking him seriously? "You know," Yorui commented, having to yell to be heard over the raucous cheering. "You won't beat me this time. You don't have that crutch," he spat with distaste, referring to his illegal tool that was revealed at the end of the Chunin exams. Boruto felt his chakra spike and the pressure behind his eyes mount. He took a deep breath, calming himself before his Byakugan could accidentally manifest. Now was not the time to reveal that ace in the hole. He was going to enjoy humiliating Yorui. Boruto watched as Yorui withdrew the 2 swords on his back and held them behind his knees, crouching slightly. He drew the 2 at his waist, clutched in his fists. Boruto slid into a defensive gentle fist stance. He cast a quick glance backwards, too absorbed in his anger to pay attention to the way the ring had changed. His side was a marshland of bubbling mud, but Yorui's was a lake dotted by tiny outcroppings of rock and sand. He could work with that. Yorui darted forward with moves that were practically telegraphed. His style of swordsmanship was obviously designed to be flashy, catching the opponent off guard with the number of swords and the sheer speed at which he came at them. Boruto had fought better. The first sword came in fast and hard, and Boruto slapped it away with a minuscule burst of chakra. The second was right behind the first, and suffered the same fate. Boruto swung a low kick at Yorui's shin. He enjoyed the look of pain that flashed across his opponent's face. Obviously, he had not expected a gentle fist user to include kicks in their arsenal. Unfortunately for him, kicks were standard in the Uzumaki taijutsu style. Then came the sword's clutch behind Yorui's knees. They were awkward to block, and at such a close range, difficult to evade. He just sort of shuffled at you, letting the swords cut your legs to ribbons. Boruto leapt forward, rolling and catching himself with his hands. He twisted his body mid-air, kicking Yorui in the face as he turned to face him. Boruto actually laughed as he heard Yorui yelp in surprise and pain as blood ran from his nose. Quickly righting himself, Boruto put distance between him and his opponent, slipping into a more aggressive gentle fist stance. Yorui wiped the blood away that had been dripping down his chin in rivulets. With a smirk, Boruto held out his hand and beckoned him to try again. The sheer snarl that he got for the taunt was so satisfying. Yorui charged him, again, roaring a battle cry. Boruto ducked and weaved as his opponent tried to shred him to ribbons. Seeing an opening, Boruto gently prodded Yorui in the chest. Without using his Byakugan, he couldn't see his chakra points. But there were some targets that never moved and were easy to hit. The brain, the heart, the lungs. As Yorui backed away, he coughed up blood. Boruto smirked. The gentle fist was deadlier than any sword. Boruto was willing to give a first-hand demonstration on the matter to anyone who disagreed. No matter how hard you trained, there was nothing you could do to make your organs any tougher. Yorui apparently didn't understand that. He came at Boruto again, growling and throwing clumsy slashes at him. Boruto grinned and was more than happy to educate him on the inferiority of his ways. A gentle prod here and an open palm strike there. All the while, he made sure to not even get a scratch from the 4 swords. He wouldn't even suffer the indignity of a single cut to his clothes. And as much as he'd been looking forward to fighting, Boruto was growing bored. Yorui just wasn't a challenge. And without being able to use more of his showier techniques, there wasn't really an opportunity to demonstrate the sheer power gap between their skill. He felt the overwhelming desire to activate his Byakugan, and flashed through the 8 trigrams palms. Boruto slapped Yorui's wrist away, his touch cutting as deep as any kunai. Yorui actually whimpered and dropped his sword, leaping away. "That's it!" Boruto heard him roar. Yorui took in a deep gasp of breath, pain flashing across his features from the wounds Boruto had given him. He exhaled a stream of multicolored bubblegum bubbles. They started small, barely the size of a coin. Then they grew larger and larger, until they were larger than Boruto was tall, and they were everywhere. Boruto stood still, not feeling the need to move as the bubbles floated all around him. It was a strange technique, one he remembered well. Without his Byakugan, he couldn't tell if they were made from explosion release, or if Yorui somehow managed to trap thunder in his bubblegum. That was actually a pretty good idea. Thunder. Boruto would have to think on that after the match was over. Boruto's grin grew feral as he smirked, inhaled, and breathed the thick mist that clouded the battlefield. Sarada watched, a little awed, as Boruto deftly avoided Yarui's impressive swordsmanship. He moved like he knew where the attacks would come from, almost as if he had a Sharingan himself. All the while, he wore an arrogant, boyish smirk that was not totally undeserving. He was good. Yarui was by no means weak, and Boruto was almost playing with him. Her eyes widened as he casually leaned in during one of their exchanges and prodded Yarui in the chest. Her Sharingan saw his chakra lash out, a nearly invisible spear of chakra piercing the Cloud Ninja's lungs. Its reach was incredible, stretching for more than a foot from the tip of Boruto's fingertip. He didn't even really need to touch Yarui at all. The two men continued to exchange blows, or rather, Boruto continued to toy with Yarui. Eventually, Yarui grew frustrated and tired and leapt back. The melee had ended, but the fight had just begun. Sarada watched as Yarui blew bubbles of sticky bubblegum infused with his own chakra. To her dismay, Boruto simply stood still and let Yarui surround him with his lethal trap. He was surrounded by hundreds of deadly explosive bubbles. Yet, he still smirked as if he had the match under control. His chakra spiked and became frigid, coalescing in his lungs as he exhaled a thick mist that instantly clouded the battlefield. Sarada's Sharingan instantly began to protest the mist's presence. She knew why. It was laced with the Genjutsu. It was an ingenious adaptation of the hidden mist jutsu, Sarada admitted. Despite being a closely guarded secret, the technique was widely known and easily recognizable. No one would think to not breathe mist. It was just water vapor. Water vapor made with Boruto's virulent, overpowering chakra. Sarada watched as Yarui looked around in the mist, expecting Boruto to emerge at any time and attack him. Already Boruto's chakra was infecting him like a disease, subjugating and taking control of his chakra pathways. Sarada watched as Yarui suddenly whirled around and charged at something. Even though she couldn't see what Yarui was saying, she could imagine what Boruto was doing to him. She smirked, nodding in approval. Yarui charged at one of the bubbles he himself had created, and slashed it with one of his swords. Sarada shook her head. No. Yarui, that was not, in fact, Boruto. There was a mighty explosion that dispelled the mist, but its job was done. Yarui flew backwards, crashing into another bubble. There was a chain reaction as the battlefield was covered in explosions as Yarui's carefully laid trap came undone. Sarada cheered as Boruto put both hands in his pocket and walked away from his opponent, a cocky smirk on his face. Her happiness and pride turned to ash as Yarui managed to struggle to his feet. She gasped as lightning arched from the Cloud Ninja, right at Boruto. And then, the most fascinating thing happened. Boruto watched in satisfaction as his Genjutsu did its trick. He was by no means skilled in that branch of the ninja arts, but he had picked up a few things from his time in the Crimson Tide. He'd never be a match for a Genjutsu specialist, or someone with a Sharingan, but that was okay. He simply wasn't suited for it. He was power and might, with the skill and chakra to beat anyone in a fight. That was his style. He didn't even have to move as Yarui slashed his own bubble and defeated him. The ultimate humiliation, defeated by his own technique. Boruto didn't even lift a finger, and the victory was his. The mist was dissipated by the explosions, and what little remained, Boruto allowed to fade. With an arrogant grin, he shoved his hand in his pockets and strode away, content to have humiliated his opponent. That was why you didn't waste time on idle talk. Real warriors know that actions speak louder than words. Boruto took that to heart, most of the time. He enjoyed a good quip and banter as much as anyone. Something gnawed at the back of Boruto's mind. Something was off. Mifune hadn't declared him the winner. That was it. Turning, Boruto came face to face with the bolt of chirping, roaring lightning. It struck him full on in the face like a stone. He flinched back, and then remember. Lightning. Right. His body did its job. Sarada gasped as Boruto was struck in the face by the bolt of lightning. At best, he would be horribly maimed for life. At worst, he would drop dead. Right there, right now. Her Sharingan was whirring as it devoured the information in front of it. Neither happened. She watched as his body simply regulated lightning. It was an amazing display. The Hyuga's bodies were so fascinating in their bodily functions. Her Sharingan told her there was simply no way she could physically copy what Boruto was doing. It was biological. His chakra points, all of them, were firing in sequence, absorbing, resisting, and transferring the lightning harmlessly. It traveled down its back, across his chest, and down his right leg before dissipating into the ring. Yurui's shocked expression was priceless. Boruto just smirked as Yurui looked at him like he was the second coming of the Sage of Six Paths. His clothes were slightly singed, and he was pretty sure the sole of his boot had melted due to the electrical current, but that was a small price to pay compared to what could have happened. Yurui apparently didn't get the message. Another bolt of lightning struck him, this time in the chest. Boruto just shrugged it off, scowling as his last crimson tie jacket was ruined. Again and again, he shot bolt after bolt at him. Boruto sighed. Some people just didn't understand exercises in futility. Many a ninja thought they could overcome his resistance to lightning, and none had been correct so far. He had worked hard, after all, to train to that level, all for the sake of enduring the higher levels of the lightning armor. Yurui eventually stopped. His eyes darted back and forth, as if trying to discern something. Boruto actually burst into laughter as Yurui formed to seal and flare his chakra, trying to release himself from a genjutsu that simply wasn't there. "Don't bother," Boruto called out, giggling. Yurui cracked one eye open, his vision clouded by anger. Boruto sighed. "Now let me show you a real lightning release jutsu," he said, more to himself than to his opponent. Alright, so he could trash talk too. The difference was, he deserved to. He weaved 3 hand seals: ox, rabbit, monkey. The interesting thing about learning the lightning armor was, there wasn't much more to learn after it. It was, as far as Boruto's concerned, the pinnacle of the element. Everything was below it, and thus easy to learn. Lightning coalesced in his right hand, slowly turning blue into a blinding white. Boruto hadn't actually learned the technique he was about to use, but he had seen Sarada use it enough. There were actually entire books written about it, due to its fame as Sasuke Uchiha's and Kakashi's Hatage's signature jutsu. Though the latter hadn't used it since the end of the war. No one actually knew why, though. Thus, he had to guess what the hand seals were. He could have done a longer string of them, but it turned out alright. The lightning armor was, in its most basic form, covering his entire body in a chidori. Surely just creating one in his hand wasn't so hard, was it? It wasn't. Lightning arced from his fist and struck stone. It sparkled, and left minuscule droplets of molten rock in its weight. It actually hurt to look at his chidori. Blinding as it was in its intensity, Boruto darted forward, using a bit of his true speed. He appeared before Yurui in a blur, instead of using the chidori-like stab. That would have killed Yurui. He used it like a slash. Yurui, to his great credit and Boruto's surprise, actually leaned back out of the path of the jutsu, but the chidori would not be denied. It chirped its defense at being dodged, and lightning arced out and electrocuted the Cloud Ninja. Boruto had the pleasure of watching up close as Yurui went rigid as his muscles were wrested from his control by the chidori. Lightning danced across his chest, thoroughly charring his gaudy white uniform. His mouth was parted in a silent, strangled cry. Boruto was a master of the lightning element, and knew when a normal man's body could take no more. He mercifully ended the technique. The faint sound of chirping echoed across the ring as the lightning faded and his hand returned to normal. Yurui fell to his knees, collapsing in a boneless mound of tangled limbs and smoking cloth. Boruto smirked, pleased, and held his hands up in a victory with a broad smile as he walked away. "Winner, Boruto Uzumaki of the Leaf," Mifune called out solemnly. To Boruto's absolute and utter surprise, and if he was honest, respect, Yurui got up. He had dragged himself to his knees, his chest heaving equally from exertion and pain. Boruto eyed him as he stared at him with a mixture of awe, anger, hate, and fear. "Impossible," he rasped. "You're nothing but a talentless cheater. There's no way." Boruto snapped, his vision narrowed, and all there was Yurui kneeling there pitifully, denouncing him for all the world to see. In a flash, he had his neck gripped firmly in his left hand and hoisted it off the floor. Boruto held his right hand aloft, the familiar bite of lightning chirping loudly. His arm drew back as his chidori grew to an unforeseen intensity, poised and aimed to pierce Yurui's chest. It all happened in the blink of an eye. Not even Boruto, with its great speed and inhuman reaction time, could react. Mifune's katana rested on his collarbone, drawing a thin line of blood from his neck. A figure in casual white robes caught his right hand. Apparently his chidori withered and died. Boruto recognized that mask and white hair anywhere. The sixth Hokage, Kakashi. 4 Anbu, 2 behind Yurui and 2 behind him, appeared, weapons drawn. "Let him go, Boruto," Kakashi commanded. Boruto was only half aware that he was gripping Yurui by the throat so hard that his mouth was frothing. His opponent had fainted almost instantly. Boruto clenched his jaw, swallowed, and with an almost conscious effort, commanded his hand to release Yurui. He threw him to the ground, raising both hands in the air in a gesture of non-resistance. Mifune lowered his sword, which was good for the old man. Boruto was not in the mood to be a sheath. He could already feel his anger bubbling back up. Kakashi, however, didn't let him go. He seemed focused on Boruto for some reason. "What?" Boruto snapped. Kakashi's eyes narrowed dangerously at the disrespectful tone, and Boruto was suddenly struck by the realization that Kakashi was, perhaps, one of the people he should fear. "Nothing," he said, his eyes closing in a false smile of reassurance. "Just that I was impressed by your technique. I never taught anyone the Raikiri. You must be very talented to recreate it." "Thanks," Boruto muttered lamely, unable to come up with anything more meaningful to say. Praise from the 6th Hokage was flattering, no matter how thinly veiled the man's displeasure with him was. Boruto wondered what exactly the difference between a chidori and a Raikiri was. Everyone knew the story of the copycat ninja Kakashi Hatake, master of 1,000 jutsus, and how he had supposedly cut a bolt of lightning in half as it struck. That was how the technique got its name. Was it just a difference in power, intensity, chakra density, voltage? Kakashi released him, and Boruto quickly made his way back to his seat. He spent the rest of that day's matches calming himself and quelling his anger. It was announced that there would be a brief intermission for the tournament, lasting only a single day. It was probably for the best, Sarada thought, since she herself was feeling beaten and battered from her fight with Shinki still. Luckily, her second opponent hadn't pushed her too hard. If she had to fight someone truly strong like Boruto, she wouldn't have had the strength or endurance to win. Boruto is a subject of much contention in the village at the moment. He had been vilified in the media for his actions during his match with Yurui. Being the son of the Hokage, he had been held to higher standards. In the powers that be found his conduct to be inexcusable. Sarada scoffed. They didn't have the Sharingan to read lips, and neither Boruto nor Yurui had said a word about their verbal scuffle, but Sarada did, and she knew what was said. And while it didn't excuse Boruto from maybe almost killing Yurui, he didn't in the end. That was what was important. Still, she was a little mad that he hadn't told her that he knew the chidori. Sarada idled in front of the automatic doors of the 5 elements, waiting for them to open. They parted and she darted inside. The clerk at the front desk didn't even bother to stop her. She and Himawari had visited Boruto enough times that the clerk knew them by name, which wasn't really hard since Himawari was the daughter of the Hokage, and she was the last scion of the Uchiha. Their families were both famous. Sarada felt the butterflies in her stomach beat their wings with a new intensity as she listened to the elevator music and rocked back and forth on her feet. There was a soft ding, signaling that she had arrived at the top floor. Sarada quickly navigated to the end of the hall where Boruto's room was. She stood before the door and hesitated. Mentally berating herself, she forced her arm to raise and knock on the door. Sarada heard the sounds of footsteps slapping against hard wood, followed by a loud crash and thud. She bit her tongue to stifle a giggle as she heard Boruto hiss in pain and curse. Sarada wiped the smirk off her face as the door clicked, unlocked, and creaked open. One blue eyes stared out at her hesitantly. She could see Boruto's hesitance to turn her happiness as he disappeared and unlit the door chain. "Sarada," Boruto greeted her with a smile. He looked both ways down the hall. "Where's Himawari? The two of you are usually inseparable." "I didn't bring her today," Sarada said, clearing her throat and pushing her glasses up her nose. "I was actually, wondering if you wanted to train," she asked. "With me," she added. "Just the two of us, then we could get lunch." Boruto blinked once. "I'll be right back," he huffed out, disappearing in a blur and slamming the door. Sarada felt her cheeks grow warm and heard the sound of running water inside Boruto's room. It took a minute, maybe 2. Boruto reappeared, hair damp from the quickest shower any human had ever taken, and dressed in a black jacket and combat slacks that he had worn in his youth. Sarada watched as he looked up and down the hall, then changed his hair and eye color to a deep crimson. The 2 chakra scars on both his cheeks faded, leaving his skin unembellished. "Did it work?" Boruto asked, moving his head to show both cheeks. "Yeah," Sarada put out. "Why do you keep using that color?" Boruto looked at her strangely as he removed his headband. which was still masked in that clever genjutsu. "It's my clan's natural hair color. Kinda sucks that Dad got Grandpa's genes," he said. Sarada's eyes narrowed as she tried to imagine a crimson-haired, crimson-eyed 7th Hokage. She found that it didn't fit. Besides, she quite liked their blue eyes. "Somehow, I can't imagine that," she said, turning and walking down the hall. Boruto followed her dutifully. "Yeah, Dad would look kinda weird. Grandma was really pretty though," he said. The two of them shouldered their way through the throngs of people in the streets, steadily making their way towards the four-stead training ground of the Leaf. The closer they were to the training ground, the less people there were. Some parts of the village were forbidden to foreigners after all. The third training ground had been through a lot since its original construction. It was host to the third Hokage and the legendary Sannin, the famous Team 7, and finally Sarada and her own team. Despite Boruto's absence, Sarada, Himawari, and even Mitsuki on occasion had destroyed and rebuilt the grounds dozens of times over. The scars showed. The river, once a calm stream that flowed at the opposite side of the clearing, had long since been dammed up by earth jutsu. The 3 logs, which had served as glorified punching dummies, were uprooted and placed on a platform of raised stone and a symbolic monument for future teams. The surrounding trees had been incinerated, uprooted, or destroyed so many times that the training ground was now triple or quadruple the size of when Boruto had last seen it. "Wow," Boruto commented, seeing the changes. "You guys have been busy." "The river is Himawari's fault," Sarada commented. "She tried to create a landslide to crush me. It didn't work, of course. But both of us were too lazy to remove the debris." Boruto laughed at that. "So, what did you want to practice?" "Us 3 are probably the favorites to win, but there's that guy from the stone as lava release," he said, mentally going over the list of the people not yet qualified for the tournament who posed a threat. "And that girl from the mist who can use ice release. I didn't know there were any surviving Yuki clansmen," Sarada said. "Her too," Boruto commented, tapping his foot idly. "The chick from the sand is another Magna release user, I think. She just doesn't use it overly." Sarada nodded. "I thought so. My Sharingan saw something weird with her chakra," she said. "So, all bloodline users besides me, Himawari, and you," Boruto said. "They pretty much have everything covered. It's a shame we don't have much more time, or I could teach you a seal that really messes with them." "A seal?" Sarada asked quizzically. "Yeah, it disturbs someone's control of their elemental chakra. Bloodline users lose their combination elements. It takes a lot of time to learn though," Boruto explained. At her confused look, he expounded. "I kind of stopped in the whirlpool while I was away. The Uzumaki taught me a few things." "Really?" Sarada said. "I didn't think the Uzumaki clan had rebuilt that much so far. That's great. It also explains why we spent so much damn time in Yamato's wooden dinghy looking for you in the Land of Water." Boruto smiled boyishly. Sorry about that," he apologized. "I'll forgive you if you teach me how you learn the Raikiri," Sarada said, pushing her glasses up her nose with a haughty, aloof look. Boruto smiled. "Sure. That's probably the best way to deal with any opponent you'll encounter anyway," he said. "I'm not exactly sure what the difference between the chidori and the Raikiri is, but I think it has to do with the sheer voltage and density of chakra." Sarada nodded. "The chidori is weaker than Raikiri, at least, unless you fully master the technique. That's what my dad said," she confirmed. Boruto nodded and weaved the hand seals again. "I just sort of channel as much chakra as I can into my hand," he explained. "Electricity arsing from finger to finger, and then force it out of my chakra points and transform it into lightning." Sarada repeated the motions, creating her own chidori. She frowned. "It's not the same," she said. "You need more chakra," Boruto said, comparing their 2 techniques. "Build up the chakra in your hand like a dam, then release it when the pressure is too much to control." Sarada's eyes bled red as her Sharingan picked apart Boruto's technique, copying it and reapplying it to herself. Her chidori faded, ever so slightly, as she began to build up her chakra again. Then, in a burst of white light, it roared back with a vengeance until the chirping sound was deafening. Sarada and Boruto shared a quick smile with each other at her success. "Good job!" Boruto yelled to be heard over the chirping as the technique quickly faded. The two of them stood there for a moment, just basking in their success. There was a quiet, almost inaudible rustle in the foliage. Had Sarada not had her Sharingan active, she wouldn't have thought it out of the ordinary. As it was, she did. "Come out!" Sarada snapped, throwing and drawing a kunai. "There is no point in hiding before my eyes." "What are you?" Boruto was saying. 2 figures leapt out of the underbrush, garbed in the white uniform of the cloud. They wore swords on their hips and their identical blonde bowl cuts making them look like twins. "This him?" Sarada heard the blonde woman ask the man. The man looked Boruto up and down. "Yeah, it's him. The hair and eyes are different, but it's him," he said. "Who are you and what do you want?" "This area is off limits to foreigners," Sarada said, adhering to protocol before doing anything brash. "Why don't you ask the kid, little girl?" the woman scoffed. Boruto appeared next to her, whispering in her ear, "There's Samui and Atsumi, swordsman from the cloud. Be careful," he warned. "I didn't want to believe that you were the Hokage's kid," the woman Samui said, "but it turns out you were lucky. You're lucky we couldn't put your real name in the bingo book." Sarada's blood ran cold as she realized just what kind of situation she was in. Boruto had a bounty on him. Two foreigners of obvious power, confronting them in a deserted forest area known for combat. No one would suspect a thing if they were to attack them. "This area is off limits to foreigners," Sarada reminded them. "Ever the diplomat. I suggest you leave peacefully." The man Atsui shook his head. "Your friend is a criminal, girl. He's wanted for crimes up and down the coast in cloud and mist. He's killed more than a handful of our Anbu, men and women I knew personally," he said. Sarada shook her head, not believing it. "You attacked us," Boruto proclaimed. "Never the other way around. Every person we killed was in self-defense. You were attacked by our Anbu because you were a menace to the peace and security of the Land of Lightning. Your little band of villainy was responsible for billions in damages to Cloud's economy," Samui stated. Sarada's eyes narrowed as the twins' hands inched towards the hilts of their swords. "You'd start a war with the Leaf if you even touch him, or me. Our fathers are the most powerful men on the continent. Is it really worth whatever damage Boruto has done?" Sarada snapped, her grip on her kunai making her knuckles turn white. Out of the corner of her eye, she spotted Boruto forming hand seals behind her back so their attackers couldn't see. That seemed to give the twins pause. "Whatever wrongs he's done, you can get justice through the official channels. If he really has a bounty on him, as you've claimed, no doubt the Hokage already knows and has entered negotiations with the Cloud and Mist. Attacking us here would go against your Raikage's wishes," Sarada continued on. The next few tense moments made Sarada's heart hammer in her chest. The blonde twins shared a long look with each other, communicating silence. Sarada almost sighed in relief as they relaxed, their hands moving away from their swords. "We will consult our leader, but know that you will have to pay for your crime," Samui said, fading back into the forest with their brother. "Wait!" Sarada heard Boruto yell, causing both twins to pause. "Did you kill him?" Boruto asked very quietly. "Yes," Atsui said solemnly. Sarada's Sharingan forced her to see the way Boruto's entire body tensed, as if physically struck. She could only wonder what had happened during the 3 years Boruto had spent abroad. Whatever it was, she wisely kept silent. Samui and Atsui faded into the forest, silent as spirits.
愛してる